saving word. Let it burn like within us. Speak until our hearts are stirred. Hallelujah, Lord, we sing for the good news. The Holy Gospel according to St. Mark, the 2nd chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. One Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. The Pharisees said to Jesus, "Look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" And Jesus said to them, "Have you not read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need of food? He entered the house of God when Abiathar was high priest and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priest to eat, and he gave some of it to his companions." Then Jesus said to them, "The Sabbath was made for humankind, and not humankind for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." Again, he entered the synagogue, and a man who was there who had a withered hand, there was a man who was there who had a withered hand. They watched him to see whether Jesus would cure him on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. And Jesus said to the man who had the withered hand, "Come forward." Then Jesus said to them, "Is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save life or to kill?" But they were silent. He looked around at them with anger. He was grieved at their hardness of heart and said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and the man's hand was restored. The Pharisees went out and immediately conspired with the Herodians against him, how to destroy Jesus. This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Please be seated. So when I was a kid, this will be a shock to many of you who have either had kids or have been a kid yourself. I did not like to take naps. I know, shocking. So much so that when I would be put down for a nap, I would lay there, and I would lay there what felt like forever. I would lay there, and finally I would go, okay, it's been long enough. I would mess up my hair. I would roll up one pant leg, because you know when you've had a hard sleep, that's what it looks like. And I would walk out. And I would tell my mom that I had one of the best naps I have ever had. And my mom would send me back into the room. I did not realize it had really only been about 5 minutes. Sometimes it seems like forever. And my mom would send me back into the room to make sure that I would fall asleep and that I would take my nap. Now, at the time, of course, it seemed like my mom was probably the meanest mom in the world. But we know that she didn't send me back into the room to be mean or petty, but it was actually with a heart full of love and compassion. Because she had experienced me in the past as someone who hadn't taken a nap, which is not the most beautiful person in the world. They had experienced me when I was tired and grumpy and knew that unless I had my rest, I would not be the best version of myself. So what actually felt like a punishment was a gift. It was a gift for me I also believe that it was a gift for my parents, for not only the respite of the time when I was taking a nap, but also it meant that my days would be long and numbered, and they would not destroy me. Because a tired 3-year-old is not a good thing. I bring this up because today the gospel lesson and our first reading is all about this command about keeping the Sabbath and keeping it holy, this day of rest. And when we as people, when we think about the commandments that God has given us, there can be that internal rebellion, our childish nature, where we go, "You're not the boss of me," especially when we're tired and we're worn out and we're like, "I don't need to rest." And we stomp our feet and we pretend. The commandments can feel like being sent back into the room. It can feel actually more like punishment than gift. But when we go back to the original commandments, when they were first given to the people of Israel, when they were given this better way of living, these commandments were all about gift. When we look and we read that here are the people of Israel who were once slaves in the land of Egypt, who had to worship every god that was put in front of them, who had no possessions, who had no days off. They were to work when they were told to work. So now they've been freed and they're out in the wilderness, and God says, "Okay, I'm going to give you a better way of living. I'm going to give you a way of living that you might not have ever imagined." So, one day a week, you get to rest. Can you imagine the first hearing that as people that have been set free? They would go, "This is something I can get behind. I like this. This here I can do." Because the Sabbath was created for them. God said, "For 6 days, I worked, I created. On the 7th day, I rested." You are going to do the same. 6 days, when you take part in this creative work that I've put you towards, on the 7th day, you're going to rest. What's interesting is that this command that was given as gift throughout time becomes something different. It becomes a hoop to jump through. To say, if I jump through all of these hoops, then I can prove to God that I love God. If I can make and I can complete and I can hold up all of these commandments, then God will know that I love God, and then God will love me. Jesus in the gospel lesson points out again that God created these commandments and created the Sabbath because God loves us and knows that we have an incredibly hard time resting. A hard time stopping what we're doing. God, in the very beginning, when God ordained the commandments and said, "Here are the commandments," God instituted the first weekend. Said, "You will rest." Which is interesting because what ends up happening is this commandment about honoring the Sabbath and keeping it holy is really, in the end of it, it's a justice issue. Because if you are like me, you know folks that are working 2 jobs to make sure that they can keep the roof over their head. We know folks that are working 3 jobs so that they can make sure that if one trip to urgent care doesn't mean that they're out on the street. And the idea of having a day off is so foreign. So it ends up not only being a command to say, you shall rest and you shall be my people, but then it's then put towards us and we say, how can we help our neighbor find that rest that they need to find? Finding ways to keep the Sabbath is crucial. Finding ways that we might rest and we might restore and we might reconnect is essential. What's interesting is that when we take the commandments and we lay them out as something that I need to do in order that I can prove my love to God, we change order and we change direction. For example, my parents, when they send me into the bedroom to take a nap, I'm not taking a nap in order to prove to my parents that I love them. Actually, it's most of the time I need a nap so that when I can come out, I can remember that I love them. Because I'm less grumpy, I'm restored, and I'm brought back to full life. There's these points when God says, you shall keep the Sabbath and make it holy, is that it is all about you and me being reconnected to the divine and the Creator and knowing our true and authentic self. To go, oh, we were created to be in relationship with you, God. We were created because you love us. And the commands that you have put forth is all ways that you say, these are ways that I love you. I want to be the only God in your life. All of the stuff that your neighbor has, you don't need that. Oh, it might feel like you need it, but I have given you what you need. And that Sabbath thing, that day of rest, that is crucial for the reconnection. So now the question then would be, what does the Sabbath look like? Now for some, the Sabbath looks like doing church, which I think is a great thing, a way of reconnecting with each other, people of God, and reconnecting with our Creator, reconnecting with Christ in bread and wine, and then being recharged for the week. Now for some, Sabbath after that might look like going out and they've got that vehicle that they've been working on. The vehicle that has been passed down from their dad or their mom, and they're like, I'm going to restore this. I'm going to bring this to life again. And as they work on this vehicle, joy is infused back into their bones, and they find new life again. For some, it might be sitting on the swing and noticing the sunrise or the sunset, or hiking up into the mountains and reconnecting with nature. You see, when the commandments were given, when the Sabbath command was given, it was given as gift. But the fear crept in that the people of Israel and the people of God would break that commandment. So what ended up happening is we have the Sabbath. So in order not to break the Sabbath, we need to figure out what work means and what it doesn't. So they drew a circle around it and created some more laws. So this will make sure that we don't break the Sabbath. Then, well, what happens if we break that circle? So there was another circle of laws drawn around this. You see this point where then we might break those, so we might create another circle. Now, I'm not saying that it's not important that we look at how we keep Sabbath. But like the Pharisees in the gospel lesson, when they see the disciples pick the grain and they go, there we are. They're breaking the Sabbath, and all of a sudden it became about jumping through hoops rather than our God loving us and reminding us that all of these were created for our well-being. So my question to you, people of God, when you are sent from this place today, would ask yourself this question: where do I find new life? What brings me joy? What restores my soul? What moves me into being a better person for that Monday morning? When I walk into work, that I might not automatically snap at my coworker or snap at my partner or be Grumpy John. How might we use the Sabbath, not only this time of worship to be reconnected and restored, but then to use the other 22 and a half hours of the day to say, how might we reclaim the gift that is Sabbath, that is rest? Because if you are like me, you know that it is hard sometimes to stop, to notice the God that's around us, and to reconnect like that cord that connects us to the divine. That's a thick cord. That's a heavy-duty extension cord. Our God, that connection that we have with our God, is not some